Hold me accountable for the debacle. Okay. I'm responsible.
Tough questions today on Capitol Hill about the rough rollout of health care reform. I'm Eric Anderson. The story tonight on KPBS Evening Edition. We'll also tell you about a warning from the feds to state school officials.
And we talk with ethics and civil rights experts about offensive Halloween costumes, some advice on where to draw the line. I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, a new report finds methamphetamine use is on the rise again in San Diego. What's behind the resurgence and where to get help?
Also tonight, we remember an icon of the San Diego art community, an icon who championed the people's art. And we'll look at how you can take free courses at UC San Diego, UC Berkeley, and even Harvard without leaving your home. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. The Obama administration faced its congressional critics today, answering tough questions about the troubled rollout of healthcare.gov. That's the federal sign-up site for the Affordable Care Act. A story from Jerry Bodlander of the Associated Press.
Swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth?
4 weeks after the disastrous rollout of the healthcare website, HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius faced tough questioning as she went before Congress. She quickly apologized for what she acknowledged was a frustrating experience for website users.
Hold me accountable for the debacle. Okay. I'm responsible.
In fact, the website was down as she began her testimony. Republicans contrasted the president's "you can keep your insurance if you like it" statement with the reality that hundreds of thousands of Americans are getting cancellation notices.
Their plans are terminated. Is he keeping his promise to them?
Well, first of all, Congresswoman, they can get health insurance. They must be offered new plans, new options.
Among those losing coverage, Congressman Cory Gardner, who held up his cancellation notice and asked Sebelius to walk in the shoes of others getting notices.
Why aren't you in the exchange? You're in charge of this law, correct? Why aren't you in the exchange?
I am not eligible for the exchange.
Republicans complained the rush to get the website online may have compromised the personal information of users.
You did not even have the most basic end-to-end test on security of this system.
The president traveled to Massachusetts to underscore that his plan isn't alone in getting off to a slow start, noting it took a while for the plan approved under then-Governor Mitt Romney to get going.
Healthcare reform in this state was a success. That doesn't mean it was perfect right away.
Sebelius says she is confident the website's problems will be fixed by the end of November. She's already scheduled for a return appearance in early December. Jerry Bodlander, Associated Press, Capitol Hill.
The U.S. Department of Education says California could lose billions of dollars in federal funding if the state sticks with a plan to suspend standardized testing. Governor Jerry Brown's already signed a bill to stop the use of the old test, so public school students can now use new online exams. Now, federal officials have sent a letter warning that the move puts the state at risk of losing $15 million for testing and billions more in funds to support low-income and special education students. Officials with San Diego Unified say the letter is part of an ongoing conversation, and there are more negotiations ahead. San Diego's NAACP is calling for the dismissal of 2 Serra High School coaches after a photo surfaced of them dressed wearing blackface. Peggy Pico takes a closer look at when costumes cross over the line and become offensive.
Both Serra High School coaches have come under fire since this photo of their Halloween costume went public. The picture was taken at an SDSU sporting event. Both coaches were in blackface and said to be dressed up as members of the Jamaican bobsled team in the film Cool Runnings. The offensive costumes have started a public discourse over what crosses the line. Joining me to discuss the issue are Lechala Wilson, president of San Diego's NAACP, and Wendy Patrick, SDSU ethics lecturer. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Lechala, what would you like to see happen to these men now?
What I would like, actually, I wish they would contact me because I would like to have some type of dialogue with them. And I know originally I said they should be fired or dismissed because I do think what they did was very offensive. However, I think having a dialogue is better, and maybe they need to take some race-human relations, some type of training so that this type of stuff doesn't happen. It's just that I held them at a higher standard because they are teachers and they have an impact on our young students. And when I have young students and parents complaining, I have to take action.
And we're going to come back to that. But Wendy, in the broader context of thing, when it comes to Halloween costumes, why do you think that some adults feel like they can do what normally would be considered really offensive behavior? They just say, okay.
Yeah, you know, we live in a culture where people are famous for being famous. There's this issue of, you know, there's no such thing as bad publicity. We see that in, you know, on Twitter feeds, on all of the types of social media where people are freely expressing themselves in ways that nobody ever would have done 50 years ago, even maybe a decade ago. So there's almost this sort of idea that it's okay because everybody does it. And, you know, the more provocative you are, the more press you get, the more attention. Maybe you'll become an overnight internet sensation. Some of that, I think, bleeds over into our judgment when we're deciding, for example, what to be for Halloween and who is it going to offend.
Okay. And Lenchala, if these coaches did not intend to offend, some people might argue, hey, look, they didn't intend to offend. This is just a joke. Why is it still offensive and why is it still wrong?
I still don't understand why it's funny, and it doesn't matter whether you intend to offend. It's called the discriminatory impact. And you have to realize, even if your intent is not bad, it's the impact on other people. And again, if I have kids and parents who are upset, they didn't think it was funny, and I still cannot understand why they thought it was funny. There's a lot of things you can be for Halloween, and why could they still not bend the bobsledders without blackening their face? We don't like it. We've never liked it. It goes back to over 100 years ago, and they should know better. And perhaps, actually, what I would like for them to do is first watch the movie Roots. I also want them to read the book called Growing Up in Slavery. In fact, I want to give them a test and see what they've learned. And now maybe that's a little harsh, but it's better than being fired or laid off.
Okay. And Wendy, do you think because these photos were posted on Facebook that this made this more offensive?
You know, I think that we all should remember we are, as this case illustrates, one phone camera shot away from having for being known not for our accomplishments or our credentials, but for our ill-advised Halloween costume. And I think part of the reason that everybody's talking about incidents like this is it's not that we just take them and share them with our friends. Everything immediately goes to social media and out to the world. That's one thing we should think through on the front end before we select a costume.
And let me just get quickly from you a few tips, if you had to say the top 3 tips in selecting a Halloween costume so it doesn't offend.
Sure. So you're going to stay away from probably anything having to do with violence or weapons. You're going to stay away from anything that's demeaning to any type of group, whether it's religious, women, racial groups, whatever it is. And thirdly, stay away from controversial issues to begin with, whether it's political figures, really politics worldwide, because again, we're a global society. Those are really the top 3 that we find the most complaints being made in those 3 areas.
And speaking of complaints, Lenchala, you've been hearing a lot from the community about this, not just on complaints. Give me a little idea of what you're hearing from both sides on this.
There's a lot of people who, on one hand, I'm getting positive comments. They're glad that I did it. They found it to be very offensive. And then they're telling me there's other, incidents. It's not just at the school, but, the workplace. So it's just opening up that dialogue. And then, I have the other side, at least some of the emails I've gotten, and I haven't checked our phones lately, and it's probably full, where people think it's ridiculous, it's gone too far, it's just a Halloween costume, and they wanted to know whether or not if 2 black coaches went in whiteface, would I find that, should that be offensive?
And your answer is?
I've never seen any black people do whiteface. And I don't know if that would be offensive or not, but if that had happened, maybe I would call them on it, but it just doesn't happen.
The cultural history isn't there
yes.
of the mockery on that one. So we've unfortunately run out of time. So Lenchala Wilson, thank you very much. And Wendy Patrick, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
San Diego Superior Court Judge Jerry Creep is making headlines again. UT San Diego says that he's received a written ethics warning from the state's Fair Political Practices Commission. The paper says the complaint relates to Creep not properly disclosing income from a slate mailer group or payments to similar groups. Creep reportedly filed corrected forms after being contacted by the agency. He will not be fined or prosecuted. Creep has drawn controversy in the past for his conservative views, including his questioning of the president's birthplace. The decision on banning alcohol on coaster trains has been postponed for a couple of months. The North County Transit District says they want to review the large amount of public feedback they've gotten, along with other policy, safety, and security considerations. A group of customers and stakeholders will be formed to review possible alternatives to the ban. Currently, passengers can drink alcohol on the trains until 9 p.m. San Diego's landmark Sandford Hotel was rededicated today. The nearly 100-year-old downtown hotel just underwent a multi-million-dollar facelift. Joseph McGuire has called the hotel home for more than 15 years. He moved here from Pacific Beach because of the location and because he can afford it. The San Diego Housing Commission's Jerry Lola says the 129 subsidized one-room apartments fill an important niche for seniors.
Hotel Sanford is really a step between homeless and market rate housing, like most of what the Housing Commission does. And it's intended for residents who meet an income qualification level.
The Housing Commission bought and restored the structure for about $12 million. Before this project, the hotel went nearly 2.5 decades without major improvements. San Diego Interim Mayor Todd Gloria says restoring the building preserves a landmark. It also allows the hotel to be part of the city's strategy to provide affordable homes in the nation's second most expensive housing market.
You have the preservation of a historic structure, one that we would want to keep in our inventory of buildings in the community, and it's been repurposed for a great social use, which is the provision of affordable housing to senior citizens in this community.
The Sandford Hotel was built a year before the Panama, California exposition held in nearby Balboa Park. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. We'll have more in a minute. The founder and director of the Ming Gay International Museum in Balboa Park has died. Martha Longenecker will be remembered for bringing Japanese folk art to San Diego and beyond.
It's normal and natural to do things beautifully, just as they've always been done. It's consistent with nature. Everything's beautiful. Animals beautiful. A spider builds a beautiful web. A sea creature builds a beautiful shell. A human being also does everything beautifully.
That video was produced in 2011 when Longenecker was inducted into the San Diego County Women's Hall of Fame. She said her life wasn't about the museum, it was about Ming Gay. That's a Japanese word for art of the people. Now, her love of Japanese folk art was inspired after she met a world-famous Japanese potter back in the 1950s. She was later invited to visit Japan to experience Ming Gay firsthand. Longenecker's long art career included 35 years as a professor at San Diego State and running the Ming Gay Museum from 1978 until 2005. She was 93 years old. A new report finds methamphetamine use is up among people booked into San Diego County jails last year. Peggy Pico takes a closer look at local prevention and intervention efforts.
A recent SANDAG study found methamphetamine use was up by 8% in women and 5% in men who were arrested in San Diego last year compared to the year before. Local hospitals and the medical examiner's office also document a rise in meth use. Here with more on why the drug seems to be making a comeback and what to do about it is Cindy Burke, Director of Criminal Justice Research at SANDAG, and Alfredo Aguirre, Director of San Diego County Behavioral Health. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Cindy, how'd you get these statistics?
We go into our local jails and juvenile hall. We talk to people who've been arrested, and then we also get a urine sample. A lot of the data that's out there about drug use trends over time, it's the general population and just that self-report information. We're able to really have a good, lengthy conversation with people and supplement that with the urinalysis and find out more what's going on with an at-risk population, people who are coming into contact with the justice system.
How much can these statistics tell you about what's going on as far as methamphetamine use in San Diego County?
Well, we want to track it over time, which is one thing, again, among that at-risk population, but the meth strike force uses it with other measures. And for this report, when we we put it out. We wanted to see, is this consistent with other trends we saw? So we know that meth seizures are up through the DEA stats. We also know that through the medical examiner's data that deaths are up related to meth. So we do think that those trends are all consistent, pointing in the same direction. And we also know that many times individuals who come into contact with the system, we see that those trends there are then later mirrored in the general population.
Okay, and Alfredo, in the 1990s, San Diego was considered the meth capital of the country. Then things sort of subsided a little bit, and now it seems like it's back on the rise. Why do you think that is?
Well, clearly the demand is high. The cost is apparently lower. And what we're seeing is, I think, for both women and men, but particularly for women, what we're seeing is certainly the issue of maybe being concerned about weight gain, using meth for that. Other issues have to do with maybe trying to do as much as possible to achieve good grades in college, or just the issue of we know that in terms of mental health conditions, women more than men tend to internalize more depression, and certainly methamphetamine use gives one a euphoric result. And so that counters that. And it sometimes starts out towards achieving some goals, and then it has a slippery slope and it becomes quite addictive and a big problem.
Well, and Cindy, your report found that the drug is used more by women than men, and as Alfredo said, that's rather historic. What did it say about teen use? Is that on the rise as well?
Well, that's one of the good news pieces that we saw. Back in 2005, we saw 21% actually tested positive of the juveniles who were booked into juvenile hall. The past 2 years, it's been 4%, so a lot lower than
from 21 to 4?
Yeah, so it's been a lot lower. For the adult females, it was 47%. About 1 in 2 of the females booked into Las Colinas or one of the other adult facilities are testing positive, and about 31% of the males. So just for the comparison there.
Alfredo, you coordinate the county's 6 drug treatment programs. How does someone get admitted into a program, and what sort of services are offered there?
Probably the easiest way to get into, if you're not certainly directed by the justice system, we have an 888 number that is an access and crisis line, and they know the resources. Actually, we go beyond those 6 programs. We actually have 50 specific programs across the county, and so that's the easiest way. And some of them are basically community-based outpatients. Some are residential, really depending on the condition and the state of the condition, where the person is in the course of it.
In general, I know each of the programs vary quite a bit. How successful are the treatment programs, especially when it comes to meth use?
I believe it's quite successful when you have leverage. What we found with drug court programs, been to a graduation very recently, is it's incredible to see once they obviously see there's someone leaning on them, and they realize this is their last chance, and their other option is extended jail time. That really sends a message, and that's not the only message, but certainly with drug courts, they work with the whole family, and the family gets engaged. And what's amazing about these graduations, when you see a successful person who's really in their achieving well in their recovery, is to see just the looks in the family's eyes when they see their loved one receiving their award of having completed a drug court program. So that's an example. I mean,
it's certainly one way to tackle the problem, and I just want to give Cindy a chance to answer this of what else needs to be done to turn this around.
You know, it's a comprehensive strategy. We have efforts already in place through the meth strike force. The sheriff is working with HHSA, Health and Human Services. It takes prevention. We need to get the message out there that even if you try it once, you don't know what the effect's going to be. So we need to get the message out there that this is a dangerous drug. We don't have the labs in San Diego County, but it's coming across the border. It's on our street. It's cheap. It's easy. It's dangerous. Number 2, treatment is available, and law enforcement needs to be out there. We all need to work together
as a whole team effort. All right, Cindy Burke and Alfredo Aguirre, thank you.
Thank you for covering this.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next news hour, the Secretary of Health and Human Services faces questions on Capitol Hill over the rollout of healthcare.gov. That's Wednesday on the PBS NewsHour.
For the last couple of years, elite universities around the country have been experimenting with MOOCs. That stands for Massive Open Online Courses. KPBS education reporter Kyla Calvert takes a look at UC San Diego's slow, steady entry into the MOOC marketplace.
So On this spring day, the seats in this UC San Diego auditorium were almost empty. Stephen Mayfield has been teaching his Introduction to Energy class for 3 years. He says the seats really only fill up now on test days, but his students aren't exactly skipping class. Most, he says, just listen to the lectures online and ask questions over email or during office hours. He says moving most of the class online this way is pretty exciting, but not because it makes his students' schedules more flexible.
Not one of them, prior to my class, had ever considered energy or the implications it had in their life, and most of them had no clue where energy comes from. They assume electricity comes out of an outlet in the wall and that gasoline just shows up at the station, and they had no idea. And so it occurred to me, if our students here at UC San Diego don't understand this, because I think they're pretty sophisticated students, then what does that say about the rest of the world? But it's not always dependent upon the cost of that item.
Some of Mayfield's lectures are already on YouTube, and now he's trying something a lot more ambitious.
I think all of us in education have been thinking about these massive online open courses. So we knew that there was a lot of power to do this, and when we saw the opportunity to get a grant from Google to actually pay for the studio time and pay for the lectures, we jumped at it.
He's turning his class on sustainable energy into a combination of video lectures and one-on-one question and answer sessions with other UCSD experts. Eventually, he expects to have about 50 hours of video to break up and put online as a massive open online course, a MOOC. Harvard and MIT each have nearly 20 active MOOCs online now. UC Berkeley has 11. When Mayfield's class is complete, it'll be UC San Diego's 5th foray into this new world.
We want to be on the one hand, innovative, aggressive, push forward. On the other hand, we want to be careful.
That's Jeffrey Ellman, Dean of Social Sciences at UC San Diego and part of a group at the university exploring how technology can improve education on the campus.
We've become very aware that our potential learners are not only the students at our campuses, but all over the world. So here you had this medium that opened up education everywhere. Access was really exciting. It was free. You know, we all dream of universal free higher education. It's been very hard to do that.
People all over the world signed up to take a free online course from another UCSD professor. This one is about bioinformatics. The class hasn't officially started, but some of the thousands of students are already posting on class discussion boards in Spanish, Russian, and Arabic. But Craig Ricker is taking the bioinformatics class from his apartment in UCSD graduate student housing.
I got my bachelor's degree from UCSD in human bio. I graduated in 2012, and since then I've been working in the dermatology department of the UCSD Med School.
Ricker says he's already learned a lot about computer programming through other free online classes.
I'm taking it to become a better applicant for grad school, and it's also helping me in my actual job analyzing the data that we're collecting.
Just having completed a free online class makes Ricker unusual. By some estimates, more than 90% of the people who enroll in a MOOC don't stick with it to the end. That's part of the reason very few MOOCs get you actual university credit. But UCSD's Ellman says he doesn't see that as a problem.
I think having a very low barrier to learning something about an area, that's valuable. There are students who do want to get credit. And there the challenge is, how do you evaluate the credit? If the experience is just online, that's a challenge. And I don't think we have figured that out yet.
But it is a little frustrating for a student like Ricker.
You do learn skills, and that's great. But when it comes to sort of professional and especially academic goals, you do need some sort of piece of paper that you say, hey, I completed this, I learned this. And that's the downside of learning on your own and through the online classes, that you can't demonstrate that.
Back in the studio, Stephen Mayfield's plan is that his course will be more than a free general resource for those curious about the basics of sustainable energy.
MOOCs are very nice in that you get a very big audience, but to actually make it a course requires quite a bit more than that.
Mayfield's MOOC will have 2 tracks, one with lectures that give a broad overview of the topics. The other will require students to register and pay for more in-depth work.
Which means interactive, grades, projects, discussion sections, the whole bit.
It won't be free, but it will open up a class taught by a prestigious researcher at UCSD to anyone in the world with an internet connection. Kyla Calvert, KPBS News.
A look at the forecast for the rest of the week. Temperature is going to be in the 70s along the coast. It'll be sunny all week, some clouds over the weekend. The inland valleys will see temperatures in the 70s and 80s, also with sunny skies, followed by some clouds. A bit cooler weather expected in the mountains, temperatures in the 60s with some sun, and there will also be sun in the desert, temperatures there up in the 80s. Recapping tonight's top story, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius went before Congress today to answer questions about the troubled healthcare website. She accepted responsibility for the site's problems and says the website will be fixed by the end of November. Meanwhile, President Barack Obama said at a speech in Boston today he takes full responsibility for making sure the site gets fixed. Tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a great evening.